I was just going to ask about the completion on Eagle Ridge over there. Who does that inspection on it? Is it engineers now, or?
Yeah, so when we schedule the inspection for Eagle Ridge, we'll have the developer's engineer as well as their contractor, and then as well as our staff, and then Stantec, our consultant, will be in attendance as well. So we'll have engineering representation.
That's excellent. I guess the reason why I asked, we had a situation in council yesterday where we had something done about 7 years ago, and they found an issue with it, and it was all wrapped in duct tape and everything, the plumbing, and somehow that got through the inspection. So
Cool.
we need to get a little tighter on our inspections on stuff. Not that it's anybody's fault, just it's the way it ended up being. So
Is there any sort of forms or anything you guys sign off for inspections, like a checklist or anything?
Yes, when we do the inspections, so there's 2 inspections that we complete. So once the services are installed, we do what's called a construction completion certificate and inspection. And that's an opportunity to go through and identify if there's any deficiencies that need to be rectified before we are prepared to issue the FAC. And then that also allows for a 2-year warranty period. So if there's any cracking in roads or issues with underground utilities, there's that 2-year warranty in which the developer can rectify those deficiencies. And then before the county takes over full responsibility, that's when we do that final acceptance. And there's actually forms that have to be signed and sealed by all parties, and the inspection documentation that goes along with it.
Kayleen, maybe you want to mention too how those inspection, the issuance of those final acceptance certificates and construction completion certificates are important for the release of security.
Yeah, that's right. So when developers are building subdivisions or developments, those sorts of things, we collect security by way of a letter of credit. And we don't release the security until some of those benchmarks are met. So at the time that we issue the construction completion, we issue all of the security back to the developer, aside from the 10% that we have remaining through the warranty period. And then once that warranty period is expired and we issue the final acceptance, the remaining security is released. The other thing is that if there are deficiencies identified at the construction completion, we can hold back additional security until those issues are rectified. So in the event if we ever have to go in and do the repairs ourselves, we have the funds to do so.
But when you, like after the 2-year period is over, like what just happened, how do you deal with that? Like the person who put it in there should be responsible for it, not the county, even if it is 6 years later. So is there any way to do something about that?
Not from the construction completion and final acceptance. As soon as we sign that final acceptance, we're obligated to undertake all of that infrastructure. So in the event that there are issues, they become our responsibility.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
go
I
ahead.
think it's important too to distinguish and differentiate between development and the obligations of a developer to have to put in municipal infrastructure and what they're required to do in terms of building and constructing to meet our design guidelines and construction standards, which is why we collect the security and why we do the construction completion certificate inspections and final acceptance certificate inspections. So as part of their approval, whether it's a subdivision or a development permit, we enter into a municipal services agreement with the developer that they have to fulfill their obligations to provide a fully serviced, developable property that could then be, developed upon. And so when the municipal infrastructure is put in, whether it's road or utilities, then of course the county takes responsibility for that infrastructure being installed. I guess the difference in that is that that's developer driven, whereas some of the other construction that goes on may be just repairs or upgrades or to infrastructure in general that was from previous years. So in those cases, we don't necessarily have, we don't have the same process that we do when it's development related. So.
So forgive me because I'm new here, so some of these questions might have been asked in the past, but like when you guys do these walk downs for construction complete, who is the person that does that? Like is it somebody in this group, or do you guys have a subject matter expert, like somebody that knows? Because like if, for instance, if I went and walked this down, I wouldn't know that this road is up to spec or such. Like who does the walk downs on this stuff?
Go ahead, Kayleen.
So it depends on the type of inspection that we're doing. So we'll use Eagle Ridge and Dunmore for an example. So when we're doing construction completion and final certificates, we have lot grading and drainage that has to be issued. We have underground utilities, we have roads, we have curb and gutter now with the newer phase. So whenever we're doing those inspections,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I can think of a day when this municipal planning commission sat here and we just issued permit after permit and approval after approval for wind energy projects that never materialized or never came to fruition. And now we're overrun with actual projects that are
Going
commencing.
to develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sat for 15 years with a bunch on the books and nothing ever happened, and those original ones aren't going and the rest are. Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of heard a rumor about Wild Rose 1 and Wild Rose 2 picking up again. Is that true?
I was just going to mention that actually. So Capstone has purchased the rights to that project from Nature Enter. So Wild Rose 1 and Wild Rose 2 are slated to go forward with, I think, anticipated construction next year.
Oh, okay, okay.
So that's another 2 projects.
And I guess for the benefit of the planning commission members, Nature Enter, which started out as West Window, which is now morphing into Capstone, would have been really the actual first project that was ever presented to Cypress County back in probably about 2006 or 2007. And yeah, it was a fellow named David Boilio from Ontario. And yeah, it was called West Window, and then it became Naturunner. And that's the project that's basically on the north side of the Cypress Hills, sort of east and west of the Elkwater Hutterite colony.
I think you and I were the only ones here at that point in time, right?
Yeah, and again, and that's, I guess, the comment I was making is that they got their approvals in place, and then it was just, yeah, for a number of reasons, never ever got anything actually physically going. Although they did put up meteorological towers to kind of monitor and identify where the original placement of the turbines would be for their data research on wind speeds and wind velocities and that type of stuff. But
So quick question, the size, just for perspective, the size of the turbines that are going up with the Cypress, are they similar to the ones just across the line in 40 Mile right now? Okay, they're big.
If I recall correctly, I think that one turbine blade was 80 feet.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
They're
big.
large.
Yeah, they're a lot bigger than the first proposed, these ones dwarf those, or those ones dwarf these.
And I think the other thing, and I had this conversation with one of our internal staff members yesterday, was the fact that in the early days of the wind projects, because technology is, and I think we all understand and recognize this now, technology has advanced so much that the amount of electricity that can be generated from the turbines is much greater, and so the number of turbines has been significantly reduced compared to the early project days of, you had, maybe the project had 80 or 90 turbines, and now that's reduced down to maybe half as many or 2/3 as many, right? So
Yeah. I think we're probably the last county in the province to get them, aren't we? Not maybe in the whole province, but yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to discuss at all the Global RAMAC surveys, Northern Investments information purposes? What's that? Yeah, I saw that. I just want to finish up this miscellaneous right now, if we can. So, any discussion regarding 21/CY 18?
I guess maybe just for the benefit of the new MPC members that may not have been here for that previous application that Mr. Weaver submitted. He had applied last year to subdivide the existing yard site that's south of the irrigation canal. And in looking at that subdivision, it was identified that there was a portion of the irrigation pivot that actually encroached into his proposed access road that was intended to form part of his subdivision to give access. So subsequent to that subdivision approval, he thereafter applied for that portion to consolidate that irrigation pivot area back into the title so that it wasn't the encroachment and allows the irrigation pivot to make its full revolution without encroaching over. So for that reason, it was a fairly straightforward subdivision, so I undertook that one and approved that one myself.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess I'll accept a motion to accept the plans report. Michelle and miscellaneous. All those in favor? Carried. All right, I see Stoltz representative are here. Okay, so we'll move to development application 21/260. Go ahead, Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So development application 21/260, and the owner applicants are Callan and Carrie Stoltz. The legal land description is Plan 2110455, Block 3, Lot 1, and the municipal address is 7319 Township Road 120. Property size is 7 acres, and it is currently zoned Country Residential District 2. The proposal is for an existing self-contained 504 square foot trailer for temporary living accommodations. The applicant is requesting approval from the Municipal Planning Commission for an existing self-contained trailer to be utilized for temporary residential purposes. This results in a second residence being considered on the property. In 2021, development permit 21/249 was issued for the construction of a residence and a shop. At present, the applicant is in the process of completing construction on the shop. However, the residence has not yet been started. The applicant has indicated that their previous acreage has sold and a deal for a house in town has fallen through, leaving them without a residence. The applicants were living in Medicine Hat with relatives. However, the insurance company would not provide insurance for the structures and equipment on their property unless a residence was present. Therefore, the temporary structure was placed. The intent is to remove the structure once the new residence is constructed and occupied. Construction is expected to commence in the spring of 2022. In accordance with Section 9.4 of the Land Use Bylaw, Municipal Planning Commission may waive or vary development standards, notwithstanding that the proposed development does not comply with this bylaw, if in the opinion of the MPC, the development would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring properties. In the Land Use Bylaw 2018-04, under the Country Residential District 2, a second residence is not listed as neither a permitted or a discretionary use. Section 54, Development Permit for Temporary Buildings or Structures, states that notwithstanding anything in this bylaw, the Municipal Planning Commission may conditionally approve a temporary building or structure to be constructed or located in any land use district for a time-limited basis, subject to the owner agreeing to remove the building or structure in accordance with the terms and conditions affixed by the Municipal Planning Commission. I circulated the application just to Cypress County Public Works, and they replied that Township Road 120 is a bladed medium-grade gravel road. A new road approach permit was issued in May of 2021. The application is for a temporary skid trailer and appears to meet the setback requirements from the county road. Therefore, Public Works has no concerns. So I did make it out to the property and take some pictures. So this is from Township Road 120 looking south. So you can see the shop to the left there that's under construction and the existing trailer to the right. And this is looking east with Township Road 120 there and the property. And we're just looking southwest toward the neighboring residence at the existing trailer. And just another look there at the trailer. And a look north. So I'll move on to my recommendation, Mr. Chairman. And so option 1 is to approve development permit application 21/260, subject to the following conditions and with the understanding that it will be placed as outlined in the submitted application. Any changes must be submitted for approval by the Development Officer or Municipal Planning Commission. And 1 through 6 are standard conditions. So we'll jump to number 7, which is subject to a development agreement to be registered against the Alberta Land Title for the removal of the self-contained trailer once the new residence is occupied. And option 2 is to refuse development permit application 21/260 as the proposal does not comply with the maximum dwelling units on a parcel as stated in the Land Use Bylaw 2018-04 in the Country Residential District 2. And that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Becky. Mr. Stoltz, would you like to speak to your application at this time?
We don't like living like this. This was not our intention. We started the shop September 30th. They were to start the construction the middle of October, which would have overlapped and given us the storage, insurable storage at the time. So we were going to live in town for a year while we built out here. We did purchase a home. The house deal fell through at the very last minute after we had already signed an agreement to sell our acreage. So this was kind of a last resort. We have a lot of equipment. We have trailers, we have a skid steer. We do not have a locked up shop. We are on our 3 months with this shop. So that is why we are in the situation that we are.
Okay, and so you're not opposed to the conditions as presented regarding registration on title for removal?
No.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't imagine you'd want to live in that cozy little trailer for too long, right?
We've experienced some hard times in here already, but
Camping is one thing for a couple of weeks, but yeah, it's a little extreme.
we went from 4,200 square feet to 504. So this is a little bit of an adjustment. Plus, I also work from home. So this is temporary.
Okay, great. All right, I'll open the floor to discussion. So Dan moves approval of 21/260 with conditions as presented for registration on title. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, so your development application permit has been approved subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will mail you a copy of your development permit. Since this is a discretionary use, there's now a 3-week appeal period that the public may appeal the issuance of this permit. The development permit will be advertised in the Cypress Courier newspaper for a duration of 3 consecutive weeks. If no appeal is filed within 21 days from the date of the issue, the development permit will become valid at that time. If you have any further questions, you may contact the development officer to discuss them after today's meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have MJB at 10:30. They will be attending in person, so we'll move on to land use amendments. Any discussion regarding land use amendments as presented? Guess we should maybe wait for Kayleen if there are. It's a strong marriage to stand that, isn't it? Living in a 500 trailer for the winter. Yeah, but the people that settled this country and lived in sod huts would think that's a palace. It's all in perspective. It's funny how you remember the good times in those adverse conditions more so than the bad. You look back more fondly than living it. Am I missing the joke? Yeah. Okay. All right. We're just on land use amendments, Kayleen, so we thought we'd wait to see if there's any input or discussion regarding the land use amendments.
Yeah, so the land use amendment on the agenda was approved by council at yesterday's meeting. So that subdivision will be coming forward for the Planning Commission to consider. So essentially, there's a vacant country residential parcel adjacent to Highway 3 that hasn't been developed. And the landowner, Dave Easley, he currently owns and operates Pet Park on the other portion of that parcel. And his intent is to build a retirement home, a single dwelling retirement home on the remnant quarter section. So he was wanting to essentially put that country residential subdivision back into the ag title. So you'll be seeing a consolidation coming forward for consideration.
All right. Move the land use amendments as presented? Absolutely. All right. So Lloyd moves land use amendment as presented. All those in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a few of the representatives from MJB. They're just waiting on a few more, and then
Okay.
they'll pop in momentarily.
All right. What was it? Yeah, it was a long day. Really? So what happened with this exemptions program? How was that put forward? The 10 for tax passports and that other stuff. Staff brought that forward. Who's a scaredy cat? So everyone here for your representation? Okay. All right. So you can have 3 of the 4 of you get the front chairs there. Okay. Well, good to see you again, Mr. Tweet. It's been a while. All right. So we have, for consideration today, we have development application 21/248, MJB Enterprises Limited. Becky will be recusing herself from this development application due to perceived or real conflict. So Kayleen will be taking over the discussion regarding it. Go ahead, Kayleen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, before we begin, I'd just like to take the opportunity to introduce who we have in front of us here today. So Mr. Jason Tweeten, of course, with Action Land, representing MJB Enterprises, and as well as Gord Gukert with MJB Enterprises is here to represent as well. And this is for consideration of development permit application 21/248, submitted by MJB Enterprises Limited. Property is located on the southeast corner of section 30, 10-3 west of the 4th Meridian. And the property size is 158.97 acres and is zoned as A2 General Agriculture. MJB Enterprises, or the operator, is proposing to expand a current gravel pit operation within the southeast of 30, 10-3. Property is located along Township Road 104, approximately 3.4 kilometers west of Highway 41. As the letter of intent describes, MJB intends to sell gravel to local landowners, businesses, and municipalities. Additionally, the granular materials will be utilized for various construction projects, including road building and road maintenance. There's currently an operational pit on the lands resulting from the issuance of Development Permit 19139, which was issued to Brian Gill, or B&C Gill Farms, in 2019. This permit was issued by the Planning Commission for the operation of a Class 2 gravel pit under 12 acres in size. The intent at that time was to utilize the materials to aid in the construction of a wind power project, and that wind power project has since advanced and is now under construction. Under the Guide to the Code of Practice for Pits, published by Alberta Environment, Once a Class 2 pit reaches an area greater than 5 hectares or 12.4 acres in size on private land, the operation must cease until the pit operator has applied for and received a registration from Alberta Environment and Parks. On November 10th, the Code of Practice and Registration was submitted to Alberta Environment by WSP Canada on behalf of MJB Enterprises. The submitted Code of Practice details a total pit area of 13.7 hectares or 33.9 acres. Therefore, a registration with Alberta Environment was required. Additionally, a new development permit is required to be issued by the county to reflect the change in land use. As identified in the submitted development plan, Phase 1 of the pit will be mined, crushed, and hauled off-site within the next 2 years. And once Phase 1 has been depleted, it is anticipated that Phase 2 will be developed. At that time, a new development permit application will be required to be submitted. As the operation falls under a Class 1 gravel pit, all regulatory requirements of the Code of Practice for Pits must be met under the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. These requirements will fall under the authority of Alberta Environment and include an activity plan, a full cost security, pit water monitoring, soil conservation and reclamation, drainage, reporting, erosion and dust control, and weed control. As detailed in the Code of Practice, the closest neighboring residence is located approximately 600 meters to the north and is owned by the landowner B&C Gill Farms. The operator will implement mitigation techniques consistent with the Code of Practice application relating to site noise and dust nuisances that may be generated from the pit's operations. The end land use is identified as pasture, which is compatible with the surrounding agricultural land use. The application details a topsoil stockpile on the west side of the pit, which will be spread and used in reclamation. The Code of Practice contemplates a 3-meter buffer area around all pit operations, and therefore a 3-meter setback is being proposed from the side property line for the stockpile. This results in a setback relaxation request of 3.09 meters. Additionally, Cypress County notes that disturbance has occurred adjacent to Township Road 104. The operator is requesting for the Municipal Planning Commission to consider allowing the proposed 3-meter buffer area from that roadway as well. Therefore, the operator's request will be for a setback relaxation of 37 meters from the center of Township Road 104 for pit operations. As part of this request, administration has identified that no mitigation measures have been identified to ensure that the operational safety of the public road would not be compromised. The operator has also expressed intent to construct a new road approach to improve the sight lines when entering and exiting the site. Once a new approach is constructed, an internal access road would be constructed to the scale. And I believe that Mr. Tweeten, as part of his presentation, will supply and present the site plan that's been supplied that details the private access drive. We'll maybe go through some of the pictures here, Ingrid, before we go through the considerations. So this is looking east on Township Road 104, and you'll see the adjacent quarter section. You can see the fence line that abuts the pit and the existing gravel stockpile further to the east. The fence line that you see along the quarter line, that is the setback relaxation request of the 3.09 meters. So that is the property line in which that setback is being requested. This is looking from the east, down Township Road 104 from the existing approach. And that just gives a bit of an idea of the disturbance along the Township Road right-of-way, as well as the sight lines. This is a view from Township Road 104. You'll see the topsoil stockpile that is within that 6-meter setback distance. The site trailer and scale, and then the laydown area will be adjacent to the Township Road 104. That is a picture taken from the pit's entrance, showing the operational pit. Gravel stockpile in the crushing area, again taken just west of where the existing approach is located. There you'll see some of the mining occurring along Township Road 104. There's a bit of disturbance along that fence line as well. That is the east boundary of the pit, so the opposing fence line further to the east. And last one, this is a view from the Township Road 104 looking at the mined area in the existing pit excavation. So in terms of the county's policies, Section 616 of the Municipal Government Act states that development is described as an excavation, stockpile, or the creation of either of them, a change in use of the land or building, or a change in the intensity or use of the land or building. Section 683 states that except otherwise approved in a land use bylaw, a person may not commence any development unless the person has been issued a development permit in respect of it pursuant to the land use bylaw. Section 8, resource extraction and renewable energy of the county's municipal development plan, states that the county recognizes the important role that the resource extraction and renewable energy plays in promoting a strong and diversified economy. As the county continues to grow, it is committed to supporting appropriate and accountable resource extraction and renewable energy development while ensuring its compatibility among human settlements and the environment. Section 8.1.4 policy states that the county shall require that applicants for county-approved sand and gravel resource extraction operations minimize the adverse effects the development may have on existing residents, adjacent land uses, and the environment. Section 8.1.6 policy states that the county will coordinate with provincial authorities and sand and gravel resource extraction industries to reclaim all lands once the development is no longer operational, including those areas within still operating developments, and to include conditions to minimize the adverse effects of the extraction operation on existing residents, adjacent land uses, and the environment. Bylaw 2018-21 imposes the Community Aggregate Payment Levy, or CAP, in respect of all sand and gravel businesses operating in the municipality to raise revenue to be used towards the payment of infrastructure and other costs in the municipality. Under the A2 General Agricultural District of the Land Use Bylaw, it states that sand, gravel, and surface mineral extractions are considered Class 2 discretionary use requiring approval of the Planning Commission. The minimum side yard and rear yard setback of this district is 6.09 meters or 20 feet. Section 48.1 states that no part of a building or structure shall be located within 40 meters or 130 feet from the center line of any public roadway which is not designated as a provincial highway. And Schedule C, extraction and production of sand, gravel, surface minerals, and borrowing excavations is attached to this report as well. Section 9.1 Roadways of the county's design guidelines states that the county may require a developer to enter into a road use agreement to ensure that the roads affected by the development are adequately maintained. In conjunction with the road use agreement, the developer will be required to provide security in the form of a performance bond to meet their obligations under their agreement. When we circulated the application, the Director of Municipal Services replied that in review of the Court of Practice report prepared by WSP Canada, it appears that the proposed gravel extraction at this site addresses and outlines operational and environmental matters, as well as reclamation of the site being returned to pasture land. The Director of Public Works replied that the county setbacks are not maintained and was not identified in the submitted pit plan. Under Section 10.1.4 buffers and setbacks of the WSP report, it states that a 3-meter undisturbed zone will be maintained around all pit operations. This does not satisfy the county's 40-meter setback from the center of a public road, and a suitable plan to remediate the risk was not submitted to consider allowing a setback variance. This poses a hazard to the traveling public. In addition, the drainage plan which was submitted for the development is inadequate, as the development has made impact on roadside drainage and has not been identified in their drainage plan. Due to the nature of the development and the impact on public infrastructure, a road use agreement should be utilized to address road use, public safety, speed limits during heavy use, types of traffic, and dust abatement. Additionally, poor sightlines from the west and a lower speed limit could be implemented during the extraction phase and can be addressed in the terms of a road use agreement. We circulated the application to Alberta Transportation as well, and they've identified that it's outside of their comment zone, and therefore a permit's not required from them. So, Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is to approve the development permit application 21/248, and it is subject to 18 conditions. With the permission of the applicants, I will skip through conditions 1 through 7, being that they're standard conditions that are attached. And I'll jump to condition number 8, that an Alberta land surveyor is to locate or post the approved pit area as per the approved sketch. All equipment and activities relating to the gravel pit shall take place in the areas approved, and the county shall not be responsible or liable for non-compliance with this condition. Number 9, the operator shall comply with all requirements of Alberta Environment, including a guide to the Code of Practice for Pits and any necessary registration, permits, or approvals. Number 10, the operator shall implement the noise control measures as submitted in the activities plan to limit adverse impacts to adjacent landowners. And crushing of materials shall be limited to Monday through Saturday between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Condition number 11, the operator shall ensure compliance with the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act regarding dust and air quality, and will implement the dust control measures as per the submitted activities plan to limit adverse effects to adjacent landowners and the traveling public. Number 12, the operator is required to enter into a road use agreement with Cypress County and be in compliance with the terms of the agreement as it relates to the project to protect the county's road infrastructure. As a requirement of the road use agreement, the operator will be required to provide an appropriate performance bond to ensure that the obligations under the agreement are met. Number 13, all gravel truck operators must be part of the Alberta Sand Gravel Registry and display a common registry identification decal. Number 14, the operator shall implement the phasing and reclamation plan consistent with the submitted activities plan. Any changes to the phasing and reclamation plan must be submitted to the county for record purposes. Number 15, all information and disclosures on the attached application are also considered to be additional conditions or advisements and form an integral part of the approval. Number 16, all pit excavations, stripping, stockpiles, and equipment must meet the minimum setback of 40 meters or 130 feet from the center of Township Road 104. Lands which have been disturbed and are located within the minimum setback are to be returned to their pre-disturbed land use within 6 months of the date of decision of the development permit. Condition number 17, subject to a setback relaxation of 3.09 meters from the side property line. And the last and final condition is number 18, subject to annual review. And as part of this process, the operator is required to provide Cypress County with verification of current extraction, processing, and stockpile areas. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kayleen. Jason, would you like to speak to the application and the conditions as presented?
As long as I don't break the mic, I will. Hopefully it's working. You guys hear me all right? Perfect? Good. Yeah, I mean, we can speak to it for sure. A bit of a background. So, Gordon, MJB, took this pit over from the Gills after they received their permit application. I'm sure everybody's well aware. There was some issues from the original. Once MJB took it over, they decided to make some changes to what they wanted to do, expand it a bit more. If they're going to be in there disturbing it, let's get most value out of it and keep footprints around the county to minimal on gravel pits. So that's why we're at the point we're at now. Like Kayleen said, that the wind farm has started construction, and so a lot of gravel has been already dedicated to that. But the future use for this pit will be much, much more than just that project. It's also talks for, like you indicated earlier, local roads within the county and for the county. So there's talks already between that. So that's a bit of the history and the background of kind of where we're at today and why we're coming in for a new application, even though it seems like there should have been maybe before, cart and horse thing. But we're just trying to make it right moving forward. With the 18 conditions, do you want to go over each one of them that we have concerns with, or how do you want to handle it? We are good on a lot of them, but not on all of them. So I'm looking for guidance.
Well, how about you go present to us the ones you're not good with, and then we can go from there.
Okay, deal. Well, you want to start with the easy ones then? Okay, we're going to jump around a bit. I'm gonna have Gord speak to this one because I don't know anything about this one. So number 13 talks about displaying a criteria on the trucks themselves. So, Gord, if you don't mind, maybe just bring up what you explained to me. I'm not familiar with this association, so I'm gonna pass it over to Gord.
Okay. Yeah, we're not members of the Alberta Sand and Gravel Association. And I don't think a lot of companies in this part of the province are. It's more of a Calgary, Edmonton association for trucks inside the cities there. And basically, I don't think anybody in this area is part of that association. I think, except for maybe Acon, who works on a lot of transportation work. So that I don't think we really want to do. And plus, it's just an extra cost to us as far as registering all the trucks with them. And then there's a yearly cost to keep that going.
I'll jump in there, Gord. I guess we had a question of kind of what the background for this condition was.
Yeah, we do too.
Not sure. I'd never seen before, but don't do this every single day.
Kaylin, can you enlighten us as to why that recommendation is put in?
Yeah, so it has more to do with the type of traffic that is going onto the roads, which, as identified in Kim's comments, that can be addressed through the terms of a road use agreement. But it is a standard condition that we have imposed in the past on operators of gravel pits that are crushing and hauling from site. So I believe that LMT is a registered participant. South Rock, Acon has a pit here in Dunmore, and the same condition was attached. So unless Kim has anything further to add to that, but it's more so to control and ensure that there's appropriate traffic on public roads.
Yeah, as far as I know, like arts or industrial, I haven't seen, usually you have a big sticker on the side of the truck, and I haven't seen any of LMT's trucks have it either, so it's usually just trucks from out of town.
So what benefit to the county does membership in the organization bring?
I think it's just a level of accountability with a higher authority. You know, so we can address it through the terms of a road use agreement, but it's a matter of actually enforcing it and having the capability to enforce inappropriate vehicle use on public roads. I mean, I'll come out and say it. I've seen rock trucks that are not supposed to be on public roads be on public roads during the wind power project. And so we do have a concern with the type of traffic that's being used on a public road that the county is liable for.
Well, I completely agree with that. I would go as far as to say there's probably some farm trucks out there that shouldn't be on the road. I just don't understand where the county's coming from that they want to start implementing how trucks drive on the road and what type of trucks in development permits. If we want to talk about this in the road use, we'd be willing to talk about this in the road use. But until the county is responsible for what type of vehicles drive up and down public roads, I think we're starting to get into a whole different ball of wax, maybe into another swimming pool that you're not really supposed to be swimming in. I mean, there's provincial law enforcement that handles some of the stuff that you're alluding to. I don't know, because I don't know the sticker. Gord says he doesn't see the county trucks running with the stickers on. So, again, we're just kind of kind of questioning why this one's in here. If you want to take it out and put it into potential discussions of a road use agreement, that'd be fine. We just don't want it attached to the development application.
Well, I'd certainly, if there's no benefit from an operational standard perspective or liability protection from them belonging to that association, I don't see the benefit to the county. If there's unlicensed rock trucks on the road, that's a whole different ball of wax, in my opinion. And I think that would be covered in a different method, bylaw and such. So, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, we don't want local companies such as Arts or Industrial not have to go out and get all this either. So, if there's something coming out there, I understand what you're trying to do, Kayleen, but I guess that'd be more up to if there's equipment out there that isn't up to par standard, that would be up to the DOTs to be sitting there and catching them at that point in time. It shouldn't be up to us to regulate that. That's a whole different level of government as far as I can see, but.
Are you finished? Is ASGA, do they provide us standards or that their members must comply with, or is there, are there benefits there, I guess, other than identification?
That I don't know, Wade.
Okay.
I just know that in past applications for pit operators, it has been a standard condition that has been required in the past by the MPC. That's not to say that the MPC can't remove that condition, and like Jason says, we can negotiate it under the terms of a road use agreement in terms of the equipment that's eligible to be on the roads. So I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with whatever the MPC decides in that regard.
Any other members want to put 2 cents in? Go ahead.
So
Jeremy.
Jason, when you were commenting about like an arts or a industrial, between like an ACON or an LMT, like that's the pit owner operator versus a rock and gravel truck company that's hauling it. Like it's kind of two different things, isn't it?
No, I would agree with you, but the problem is this development application is going to be adhered to by not just the operator, which is an NJB, but it'll be also any of their subcontractors, any of their successors, any of their agents, and so on and so forth. So if they hire a third-party company to haul gravel for them, they're going to be adhered to the same requirements within this development application. So when you attach this potential clause to the development application, it goes to the pit, and it goes to everybody that works for the pit. I'm suggesting if we do want to talk about safety of trucks and requirement of a certain level of, I guess, sufficientness of trucks, maybe we could talk about that in the road use agreement, which actually would talk about the roads we use and the type of trucks we do. It's like saying to a farmer, you can only farm in this county if you run John Deere combines, right? I mean, this association is fantastic, and it's great, it's got a lot of good things for it, but is it applicable to hauling gravel out of the gravel pits in Cypress County? That's our question. There is operators in the area, maybe are associated with them, that have operations within big municipalities like Calgary and Edmonton, and there's reasons for these associations for that. But I'm just questioning what the county's looking for here, and if we're potentially swimming in a different pool than what the development permit should be in. I'm just wondering if we're getting blurred lines here.
I guess we'll have to, but I hear your point, and I would tend to agree. I don't think we should discriminate by association in any way, shape, or form. So, and if this association doesn't bring us standards or liability protection or anything else, then it really is, I think it's trying to cover one issue with another. So I would agree with you on that. We'll leave it up to the process to see whether we contain that within the motion that's presented, if there is one today.
Okay, fair enough. Well, just to confirm.
Any more discussion from the Planning Commission regarding that? Okay, so
I was just gonna ask, Kim, did you have anything to add to it, or?
No, I'm not too familiar with that association and the regulations, so.
okay, so thanks. That's well taken. And do you want to move on to your next point?
Yeah, I'm going to leave the real good one to the end, so that's okay. Just going to put it back. So, excuse me. So 16 and 17 go together. We're totally fine with 17. We actually are the ones that suggested that in our application. But 16, I just wanted, so that Kaylee talked about a map. I sent it to you yesterday, Kaylee. Did they have this, or is it?
Yeah, Ingrid can pull it
Oh,
up for you.
perfect.
There it is.
Excellent. I'm looking straight ahead, obviously, so hopefully this is behind me. Okay, perfect. So I guess the point of discussion here, just so everyone's understanding.
Sorry, Jason, do you have a laser pointer in front of you?
I hope I do. No, this
might
action
help
pen
if
does
you've
not
got a
have one
pointer.
on it. Oh, you got one? Holy moly. This? The red button? What the heck's going on here? There we go. Okay, so I think everyone can see, hopefully. So what the discussion point is that from the center of the road north, there's a 40-meter setback for municipalities for development. I'm going to hence that word because that's what's key. Earlier on, you heard Kayleen talk about development being excavation. Now, if that's truly what the definition of development is, I think one could almost take the leap of faith to the argument of then asking what's the definition of excavation? What's excavation? Is that turning dirt over? Is that digging a hole? If it's digging a hole, how big of a hole is it? If it's turning dirt over, how deep is it? Is it a cultivator? Is it an air seeder shank? Is it a deep till? Like, what is the definition then of excavation? For normal development setbacks in oil and gas and typical other sets of development applications with the AER and the AUC and those regulators, they define it as a permanent dwelling. A permanent dwelling is something that's, and I believe the county has definitions for permanent structures also with, that has to be not movable, has to have structural aspects to it, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get into that. So typically development is a dwelling or a structure that is permanently there. And the reasoning behind this is for safety that was indicated earlier. The idea is, and excuse me if I disrespect anyone, but the idea is that if there's an accident or somebody veers off the highway or the road in this case, that there's a buffer in between that and obstructions so that that individual doesn't possibly cause more damage to themselves by hitting a house that's 10 feet off of the road because they slipped off the road in a snowstorm. We're trying to have a safety. We haven't had a safety buffer at 40 meters. That's the development restriction. So within that 40 meters, they're asking for no development to take place. But in reality, they're asking for no above ground structures, permanent above ground structures to be in place, which could potentially be a harm. So if you vision this, tonight there's a snowstorm and you veer off the road and you hit the ditch and you take out a fence post, well, you're probably pretty upset that you hit a fence post, but you're probably taking it out. Is that a permanent structure? One would argue not. That's why they allow you to do it. You don't need to get restrictions to put a fence post in. You don't need to get restrictions to put a stack of bales in or a silage pit. I drove by numerous of them on the way here today. That's not in place. If I want to build a house, I do. I get that. That's the difference. It's a permanent dwelling. If I want to put a grain bin up, I do. I get that. That's a permanent dwelling, a permanent structure. So going back to the definition and what the understanding is, we're asking for a relaxation to do excavation. All MJV wants to do is take the topsoil and the top dirt out, get to the gravel, mine the gravel, put the dirt back. That's it. We're looking to store soil for a period of time, and we'd like to do it within that 40-meter buffer. So depending on how we look at the definition of this word excavation and this word development is really the root of that concern. We're not asking to build an above-ground structure that would be permanently situated there, that would not be able to be moved. We're looking at mounds of dirt, that's it, temporarily. And I would go as far as to ask the comparison of that same scenario to the rancher that's got his bales stacked along the road, or the feedlot that has his silage pit along the road, or the fence post itself that you've seen the pictures of. So we're totally fine with agreeing that we will not have any permanent structure within that 40 meters, but we're needing to utilize the ability to excavate the gravel that's underneath it. If we're not able to excavate the gravel, then that entire swath along the edge of the south end is completely useless to us. And we will not be able to excavate any of that gravel for the use of anybody, including the county on potential road development in the future. It's a wasteful chunk of land. Now, in hindsight, yes, the original application probably should have set back this to begin with, but that's not the case. So right now, all we're proposing, and hopefully you can see the blue, that's just an access road coming in. So we're not expecting to mine underneath the access road portion, but it sure would be nice for Gord's operation in the future to be able to excavate the other sides of the road. And we're just talking stripping soil, looking for gravel, stockpiling gravel, and bringing it back. We are agreeing to a 3-meter setback from the property line already with no excavation, all right, including digging of any depths. But this, I believe it's 16, would impact us being able to utilize that setback area for anything else. So I'm just trying to understand these definitions of setbacks, especially with the word excavation, because by no means are we developing any sort of above ground structure, we're literally just looking at digging the dirt. No different than the neighbor that cultivates every year or the air that goes up and down. We're going to disturb the dirt. Yes, we might disturb it at a bit different level, and yes, we will look at stockpiling dirt for periods of time, but those piles would be much, as you see in the pictures, much comparable to either a pile of grain sitting out there or some bales or silage pit or anything else that you could see all around this county within 40 meters of the road. So I'm just wanting to see on that discussion if we could look at getting that relaxation to maybe be worded differently so that it would allow for excavation and stockpiling of dirt only. That's all we're looking at on 16.
Okay, I think, I don't know if you were around planning commission, but a few years back, we had one citizen that would drive around the county, and Jeffrey would remember this, and report all of the structures and trees and bale stacks and grain bins and grain piles and well shacks and everything within the setback. And every year they'd come to planning commission. And so I think it is in effect, we see a lot of non-compliance with the setbacks when it comes to agricultural use and trees and that sort of things. And I think at most of the time we do turn a blind eye to it. The issue that I believe the setbacks are and structures and trees and piles are, the reason they're there is to prevent snow from piling up on the roads and to allow the county to maintain the roads without interference from adjacent structures and trees and such. So if I'm wrong, Jeffrey, maybe correct me on that, but
Okay, well, yeah, I'll chime in, and Kayleen, if you want to add anything, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, when we look at the definition under the current land use bylaw, development means an excavation or stockpile of materials and the creation of either of them, meaning that it's man-made, right? It's human, as the result of human activity. And certainly, like you described, Mr. Chairman, the concern is twofold. Number one, certainly bale stacks do have to be set back 40 meters from the center of the road for snow drifting purposes, just like any other potential obstruction that could create snow drifting. But the alternative concern also is that if somebody was to come off the road allowance, that is there an obstruction there that could create a hazard that could be detrimental for the traveling public, and especially if it's man-made or human activity. And so when we look at, again, development means an excavation or stockpile. So when we think of the definition of excavation, it talks about making a hole or a cavity in the form of a hollow. And certainly, if there is a crevice or a hollow or some sort of cavity, and somebody comes off the road allowance and goes into that, there could be, liability to the county for permitting that to occur in proximity of what has to be the setback from the center of the road allowance. So I think that's, in essence, the nutshell of it all as to why the county has the setback requirements, as you mentioned, to prevent snow drifting and other obstructions, as well as it also impacts the ability for the county to make upgrades and road allowance improvements when we have these types of things within a certain distance of the road allowance. So again, it's for public protection as much as anything on and off of the private property.
Thank
And
you.
Kayleen and our Public Works Director can add any other comments if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Kim, would you like to commit or comment, or Kayleen?
No, I think Jeffrey handled that very well. I think when we're talking about setback requirements, if we travel down the 120, we see Steep Rocks Pit, and that's a prime example of the reason why we were requiring that.
So Steep Rock are within the setbacks with their development there, and we required guardrails to be constructed to prevent. So would the developer, I know we don't have the traffic on this road, and I feel a little bit ridiculous even saying it, but guardrails, is that a option?
Well, if safety is the number one concern around the county, and I can appreciate it should be, and hopefully it is, and if we're truly worrying about these hollows, I mean, we should be putting guardrails around every single field that's cultivated then in the fall, because every one of these farmers goes right up to the boundary of the line. So, I mean, if it's a guardrail, I mean, we could talk about some sort of protective fencing if that's what the concern is, and if that would help us get over that fact. Now, I don't know, would you rather hit a guardrail or a stockpile? I'm not, I mean, steep rock is an elevation concern, I believe, whereas the guardrail is to also hopefully stop the person from going over the edge, but not necessarily hitting the stockpile. I don't know that application well enough to know what the reasoning for the guardrail was, but if the county or the MPC is looking to make some concessions on 16, that would allow for excavation to happen within the area that we've identified we would like to, and it would require extra protection such as a fencing or guardrail. We could definitely talk about that. We're not against it. That's why we're here. We're trying to understand what we can and cannot do within this area.
Do you intend on stockpiling product in that zone?
Yes and no. I mean, do we have to? No. It would be easier than digging it and hauling it back 120 feet, but they're more than willing to do that. So we always come in here, at least I do, asking for the moon, settling for the stars. So we would like to just excavate. Stockpiling would just make operations easier. But absolutely, we again can negotiate on that if a stockpile definition is the concern or if excavation is the concern.
Perhaps you don't intend on digging 30, 40 feet down beside the road, right? This is a different development than Steep Rock, I believe.
Gord's probably better to talk about the depths and the slope and so on.
Yeah, I don't, from what we've mined so far, the base of the excavation would not be any more than than the excavation to the north there. So basically we're taking off about 10, 15 feet of material. And then basically we'll bring the overburden as we proceed northward. We'll bring the overburden back to fill that area back in again. So that's about all we'll be doing in that area.
Dan?
Well, I see what you're trying to do, but I understand what the county's trying to do, because as soon as something goes wrong, we're the first ones that are named in the lawsuit, especially if we change the rules here. So if you got some kind of, what Wade had said, some kind of guardrail or something like that to protect, that's all we're looking for, is just to protect our liability.
Yeah, that would be fine. We can put up like some temporary concrete blocks or something along the edge there.
Well, how about we
When we're ready to look at that, we can get somebody from the county out and go over it and assess the situation when we get there.
Okay, so we need an amendment to that condition then if that's what's agreed upon. And
If
that
that
has
is,
to be
yeah.
put in a,
I mean, I understand it's way out there in the middle of nowhere, but that's when things go wrong, right? Because we get lax and all of a sudden something happens and then we're on the hook. So just do it right off the start and make sure nobody's liable.
Kayleen?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, so that the MPC is aware that if we impose a condition for guardrails to be installed along road allowance, those guardrails then become the county's responsibility. They become our asset for maintenance and all those sorts of things. So there might be more of a operations consideration that the county would have to give before we would recommend guardrail installation.
Kayleen, what if we put the guardrails within our 3-meter buffer that we've already proposed not to do anything within? Would then not alleviate that concern?
Yeah, if it's located outside road allowance and on private property, it would then be your responsibility.
Okay, then, so just so everyone kind of come back then, so on the map again, so the orange line at the very bottom, just north of the red line, is the 3-meter buffer zone that we're saying is totally, we won't do anything. So then we would suggest that that's the area where the guardrail or whatever we want to use for wording would be. So it would be put on to private land. And then that would utilize, to help allow the development to be within the next 27 meters, which gets the 30 inside to that black dot. singing the same song, I think.
Is it?
Dan?
This isn't gonna be permanent. This is just till you excavate and then put everything back in. So it's just temporary setup.
Yep.
So it should work on that 3 meter.
Yeah, just so that it's clear within whatever condition that the planning commission poses, that it has to be contained on private property so that it does not then become the county's asset to be responsible for to maintain.
Okay, so, okay, go ahead, Michelle.
So if you put that guardrail or whatever on private property, does that alleviate the county from any liabilities?
I think the county is still offering a deviation on our land use bylaw. The guardrail may help to mitigate risk, but I don't think that it would completely hold us not liable for issuing the relaxation in the first place.
Yeah, but that could be said about every relaxation that we've done, so we're trying to mitigate the best we can with the circumstances and help. If this was on the 120, I'd say no way, we're not gonna do it, but we're out there where it's less traffic and.
Yeah, I mean, look at the 120 and how close the steep rock pit is to the highway. You feel a little ridiculous even talking about this because we're not going down very deep here, and this is not a well-traveled road. So, I mean, you could CYA 6 days a week and all you want, and really, what are you just doing? You're making more regulations and rules and wasting your time. I mean, the bottom line is, I think if we do what's practical and not, you know, we should avoid any liability that way. Lauren, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I do. If any of you guys have ever been out to that area, before MGB did anything there, they have done nothing but improve that roadway for snow blowing in and making it level. There used to be a high hill there. They've taken that away. If anything, they've helped the county on road maintenance or winter snow removal or whatever. They've improved it tenfold from what it was. I used to go up there every winter and push that road out so the school bus could get through and the neighbors could get through because we have a tractor running every morning to feed cattle. So I know they're worried about what's there now. They should have been worried about what was there before. It has been greatly improved from what it was. And what they're planning on doing is just taking that gravel out and putting the fill back in. So it is going to be back to the way it was, but level instead of a hill.
So if there's a hill there, Lauren, bringing that down, it's not like creating a situation we have at Steep Rock where you got basically a face.
No, not at all. It's going to be safer if somebody runs off the road now than what it was way before. Before the hill was a lot steeper. We used to farm that. We couldn't drive up it with a tractor, let alone down. So they're taking that away. It's going to be a gradual slope, and they're improving it. So from a farmer's standpoint, I'm glad they're doing it. I might be able to farm that again someday. Who knows? If they take it and level it properly, which is the plan. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Okay, thank you for that input. Any more discussion regarding this one? Nigel?
Did I understand you correctly? You're willing to forego stockpiling within that 40 meters?
We're willing to discuss whatever altercations or alterations or revisions that you're willing to put on to 16. We're just not willing to accept 16 as it's currently written.
So, dealing with 16 here, we're okay with a guardrail or a cement barrier within the land of, within that 3 meters. Does that take care of the problem with 16?
Personally, I think that's overreach. I would, like Nigel said, I would be in favor of not stockpiling within that area and just, I mean, there's lots of natural places in the county we don't want to run off the road. I mean, it's, you know, I don't want to, you know, I want to absolve the county of liability if possible, but we need to be real as well. We don't have 10,000 vehicles a day going by there.
No,
And I
But you
think
just
maybe
said
the,
it. You said it's a natural thing. This
Yeah.
is man-made,
Yeah.
so.
but even a guardrail, okay, so somebody goes off the road and hits a guardrail, the county made me put the guardrail there, what's the liability there? Or concrete blocks, what's the issue with snow then? We're saying you can't have stacks, you can't have trees within that buffer zone because of snow, then we're requiring them to put a 4-foot fence there that's gonna block snow.
Yeah.
So I think, maybe we're killing this with a sledgehammer when we don't need to. But that's my opinion.
Just potential concession, real quick, guys. Would the MPC be willing to allow the operator, the applicant, just trying to help with the wording, would allow them to do pit excavation stripping with the use of equipment only within that area, and we remove the word stockpile? I mean, if we can't excavate with equipment and strip, then we wouldn't want to be in there, but we won't stockpile within that area.
Mr. Chairman, I have a proposed condition for replacement of condition number 16.
Okay.
So setback relaxation of 37 meters from the center of Township Road 104 to allow the operator to excavate and strip within the minimum setback. There shall be no stockpiles or equipment storage within the minimum setback.
I like it. Anybody else? Anybody disagree with that? Applicant, disagree with that?
Just a real quick question.
You're asking for the stars again, or
No,
what?
definitions. Equipment storage. So we got to back the equipment out every night once they're shut off. Okay. You know what? I think we'll agree to that, even though I see combines parked along the road every night, but I'll let that one go.
I think you should probably take it upon yourself to drive around and report this every year, because we're missing that person in the county right now.
Deal, a new job. Okay, and then
We need more to do with planning commission every month.
And we left the real last one to the end. Yeah. So number 10. So number 10 is a restriction set out on the crushing. So again, I'm gonna pass this on to Gory to handle on the crushing operation aspect.
Okay, they've mandated that we go from Monday to Saturday between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. I know I checked with our crushing subcontractor, and they work 24/7 during the summer. So he has 2 crews that work on that spread, and to do as much as they need to in as little as time as they have. That's basically their work plan. So we'd like to get that changed, that they can do that. We've checked with the surrounding people that are within I don't know, 3/4 or a mile radius, and the Gills are okay with it as far as noise and stuff goes. And then
Sorry to interrupt, Gordon. We obtained a letter signed by the next closest resident after the application was made. So if you want a copy, we have it.
So we'd like to get that relaxed.
Just
to
for clarification, what's the distance from the extraction site? Is that neighbor that you've got the signed document from?
I think they're half a mile.
Half a mile. What's the next neighbor distance outside of that?
The Gill Farms.
Okay, and then there's nobody else for a ways, right? If I remember.
Yeah, there's.
Oh. I don't suppose you've got a signed document here, do you? Actually, she's not. We can't talk to Becky. She's reclused herself, so. We don't have a letter of opposition from any neighbors. I guess we'll put it that way. I guess once it's public, we may, right? Kayleen?
So my comment on the hours of operation is that under the A2 General Agriculture, a gravel pit is a discretionary use. So what that means is that the MPC has to give consideration as to, is a gravel pit appropriate in this location? If it is, then what are the conditions that should be imposed to help limit any adverse effect to adjacent landowners? Keeping in mind that it's not only today, this gravel pit could operate for many years. Landowners can change. Houses can be developed. We don't have a crystal ball to be able to forecast that. We kind of have one kick at the cat to impose the proper conditions on the development permit unless there's an expansion and a new application comes forward. But in the event if we receive concerns 6 months, a year from now, we're hand-tied in terms of what we can do. So my recommendation for the gravel crushing hours will stay as is. It's the Planning Commission's consideration whether it's appropriate to allow the crushing 24/7.
Question, are our hands tied even though this is an annual review?
Yes. So the annual review doesn't allow us to go back and amend conditions, but it does allow us to bring the applicant or operator in if there are concerns.
Okay. Good analogy would be the lighting on the greenhouses. Okay. What have we done regarding this for the Vossler pit and the Elkwater Colony pit? What have we done as general standards in the area?
So I did pull development permits dating back to about 2012. Elkwater Colony along the Bull Trail, their application back in 2018, I think it was subject to crushing Monday through Saturday from the same hours as is proposed with MJBs. Elkwater Colony does have another pit that they were approved for in 2019. However, that one is just for stockpiling and hauling. There's no crushing involved. And the other permits that date back to the earlier days, there were no conditions that were imposed. The conditions on those previous permits were fairly generic and fairly slim.
So anything we've done in the past few years is on agricultural land in that area have these hours of operation?
Where there's crushing involved, yes, yeah. And when you see our new land use bylaw come forward here in March, we will be recommending to council that those hours of operation be actually implemented into the land use bylaw. So they will be mandatory.
Okay. Any discussion, Dan?
Yeah, so they're trying to stay consistent on that, but that doesn't say that we can't for this one time. We want to leave that in case it changes hands in the future. But we could give 30 to 40 days when they start crushing to get it done and get it over with, and then it goes back to the regular rules. Just to protect us in the long run, but it gives them the leeway right now.
So would that be in the form of a permit? They would come in for a permit for 24-hour crushing for this period of time?
Yeah, we can do it that way, can't we?
Yeah, they can apply on a seasonal basis. They can come in and request the Planning Commission to consider a temporary application essentially to allow for the crushing of materials within a certain time window, and then it would be subject to an expiration. But again, it would be subject to an appeal period where adjacent landowners could appeal that issuance. That is an option though.
So because they're here now, do you have a time when you're going to start crushing this?
We haven't set up an actual date yet, but I imagine we're hoping probably as soon as the weather's favorable enough, probably end of April, beginning of May.
I'm just trying to find a date here so they don't have to come back and we could approve this 30 to 40 days today so they don't have to reapply and come back to MPC in 2 months' time.
Would it be an MPC application or would it be a permit, like I said?
I think, Mr. Chairman, that it would be beneficial to have it as an entirely separate development permit that comes forward, because I don't want to confuse the conditions on this permit that will be for the continual operations. So I think it's best to leave that outside of this development permit and leave it separately to a separate application.
Okay. So we can leave 10 in as it sits, and then with the general agreement that there will be a permit available for crushing 24 hours. Applicant?
Could we make revision to 10 that indicates that one could apply for such a permit? Because right now it doesn't even say that you can apply. It's just a verbal conversation amongst us here.
Keeleen, what say you on that?
I don't think that's needed because the additional crushing would constitute a change in intensity of what the development is in which a development permit can be applied for. So I don't think that's necessary in that condition.
And it's not going to guarantee you anything anyways.
No, I know, but you're worried about future development. You talk about somebody else moving in and starting to live closer and so on and so forth. They're obviously going to be under if somebody wanted to build a house across the road, they could pull this development permit and figure out what kind of restrictions are associated with it so that they knew the hours of crushing allowed and not allowed. So that's what I'm trying to get at. If we're worried about the future, which we should be, let's try to get it figured out right now. So that when the guy who does want to build a house across the road, he is fully aware of what he's getting into when he's moving into that area by pulling the development application, hopefully approval, and going through the conditions and reading 10. It just says that you can crush between here and here. It doesn't say anything about being able to have the ability, if so requested, to make an application. So, I mean, if the original concern is about future and having to worry about future, which I think it should be, let's allow the future individuals to have the ability to understand what they're getting into if they do choose to buy the land across the road. Because there is some buyer beware involved.
I somewhat agree with, if you're buying, or if you're gonna build a house across the road from a gravel pit, you gotta be expecting that. Like, buyer beware when you're looking into doing that. So, I don't know, it's more for the people that are already out there is what.
Thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with the planning supervisor's explanation and recommendation that any change in intensity basically implies that a new development permit or another permit may be required, and that would be at the discretion and consideration of the Planning Commission. However, if we can move past this issue, perhaps just some additional wording to condition number 10 could say, any deviation from these hours would require a new application or something to that effect, if that will help move this along.
Okay, Kayleen, does that fit well in your craw? Okay, all right. Anybody besides Mr. Tweeten opposed to that? I think we're working well together here.
Great. I think it's fine.
We're working well.
good.
We're working well. Go ahead, Michelle.
Could you make it its own separate condition? Like just not necessarily in number 10, but its own thing saying that you could apply for a permit?
Yeah, it could have its own standalone condition that any deviation from any of the above listed conditions requires the issuance of a new development permit. You could include it as a standalone condition as well, but then it applies to all of them, not just the crushing.
Right, because I was just thinking, and not that it's going to happen out there, but if somebody, say from the city, moved out there and read this, I get where you're coming from, that if they, were crushing on a Sunday, that the adjacent landowner would come in and say, well, they're crushing on a Sunday, we can't do this, Like, so I agree with Jason that it should be, even if it's by itself, just something that says if they need a permit to do it. So then it just lets people know that it can happen.
Okay, do you want to wordsmith that up, and then we'll continue on. Any other points?
Just if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to tag on to that, I think if Kayleen in your wording, if it could say any deviation or change in intensity.
Yeah, so the condition number 10 would read as is with the addition that Jeffrey had just mentioned.
Number 19, we're going to call that?
Nope, that'll just be added on to condition number 10.
Okay, so
It'll
we're
just
going
be
to
revised.
include that into 10, okay? So amended condition 10, okay? All right. Jason? What else is on your laundry list?
No, I think that's the end of it. We left a good one to the end. So are you guys going to try to edit everything now to see a final version, or how did you want it? Do you want to take a quick recess and write it all up now, or what?
She's just finishing 10, and I think otherwise we've got 16's already written as presented.
And 13,
and
we got to
13
discuss.
will just be removed.
Yeah, remove that one.
Any discussion regarding that from Planning Commission? Okay, go ahead.
So I'd just like to go over the conditions once more.
Sure.
So condition number 10 will read that the operator shall implement the noise control measures as per the submitted activities plan to limit adverse impacts to adjacent landowners. Crushing of materials shall be limited Monday to Saturday between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Any deviation to the hours or to the intensity of the use shall require the issuance of a new development permit. Condition number 13 we're removing. And condition number 16 will read setback relaxation of 37 meters from the center of Township Road 104 to allow the operator to excavate and strip within the minimum setback. There shall be no stockpiles or equipment storage within the minimum setback.
All right, okay, so any more discussion? Motion,
Oh, I just wanted to,
discussion, go ahead.
just wanted to verify, so you know, if you got the dates that you want to crush, you got to get in here and get that started right away, because you know it'll take a month or so to get.
Yeah,
Back
I
in.
totally
And then you got
appreciate the
your-
timeline associated with applications, so we'll get the crystal ball out and try to figure out the weather conditions, and we'll be back.
And just to also factor in the appeal period as well, right? So you'll have the 1 month that it takes to process the development application, but then it doesn't become active for 21 days afterwards. So you'll want to leave yourself about 2.5 month lead time.
Yeah, you might see me really soon. Yeah.
You probably have to book, like, you don't have, MJB doesn't have their own crusher, right? So you gotta book anyways 2 months ahead, so it's really probably not that big of an inconvenience, I would imagine.
It'll just be having to book or ask for a longer period of time, maybe 45 or 60 days instead of the 30, because like Mrs. Brown indicated, with all the potential hurdles we're going to have to go through, to be able to sit here and say May 15th, it's not super easy, so we'll probably just be looking for a longer period than we normally would have been.
It could be the same period, it's just when it commences and starts, you get your 30 or 40 days, whatever's agreed on. So if you applied for the 15th and you don't get started till the 30th, then that's when your time starts.
I know, but I'm sure you can appreciate, Mr. Hamilton, that we only have 30 days to do it in. So to be able to predict when that 30 days is in February is going to be difficult. If we could come in and know next week that we're good, that'd be different. So we're gonna have to have a buffer zone for timing for weather associated with that application. We can't come in and just ask for 30 days, 4 months out. We're gonna have to ask for 60 days, 4 months out, because it's 4 months out. I'm sure you can understand that. But we'll deal with that at that.
We can cross that bridge when we come to it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion? Motions? Nigel moves approval of development application 21/248 with the removal of number 13, amendments of 16 and 10 as presented. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Your development permit has been approved subject to meeting the conditions which were previously discussed. The county will mail you a copy of your development permit. Since this is a discretionary use, there is now a 3-week appeal period that the public may appeal the issuance of this permit. The development permit will be advertised in the Cypress Courier newspaper for a duration of 3 consecutive weeks. If no appeal is filed within 21 days from the date of the issue, the development permit will become valid at that time. If you have any further questions, you may contact the development officer to discuss them after today's meeting. Thank you, gentlemen. Brian's brother. Okay, next meeting, February 8th, 10 a.m., back to the normal date. I think we've covered everything up. Adjourn the meeting.